Samantha Power on the subject of the U.S. role in this pandemic, or at least what it should be. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
When keeping track and keeping...
Do you need to listen to this ad for QuickFit? Well, that depends on a few things, like, do you own a car? Do you want to keep that car in tip-top shape? Do you want a garage that will help you keep it in tip-top shape, with everything from wiper blades to servicing, but won't look at you oddly when you've absolutely no clue what size your tyres are, or where on earth you put that locking wheel nut? Then yes, you definitely should listen to this ad. Find your nearest centre, or book online at quickfit.com and drive away happy.
Want to know a great way to discover the latest and greatest sports audio on TuneIn? It's easy. Just make sure push notifications are enabled on your phone to receive recommendations of sports talk radio and podcasts, along with important breaking news updates.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
To help make the most of your time at home, TuneIn is sharing our top activities for social distancing. Tip number 5, cooking something. We all get stuck in a culinary rut with our normal routine. Shake things up in the kitchen by trying an ambitious new recipe or an over-the-top dessert. If cooking really isn't your thing, you can always support your local restaurants by ordering out. For more indoor inspiration, search Listen from Home on TuneIn.
For weeks, we've heard about panicked shoppers causing a run on toilet paper by irrationally hoarding it. But that ignores one key factor.
That the toilet paper you use when you leave the home is not the same toilet paper you use at home.
How incomplete information, whether about supply chains or infection rates, leads to incomplete narratives. Don't miss this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
The moves may be choreographed, but the drama is real.
I dare you, I beg you to come down here right now!
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the body slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown, check out the What's Wrong with Wrestling show. And for a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, listen to Talk is Jericho. For these and more podcasts, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
You know, I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in the front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I went up high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind, giving up. I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The NFL Draft is on TuneIn.
Starting Thursday, April 23rd, ESPN Radio has you covered with live coverage, discussions, and analysis of every round.
Be there when the future stars of the NFL find their home.
And your team selects the players that will shape their future for seasons to come.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
States because of our links through trade, through global supply chains, through family ties and so forth, to even remote parts of this earth. So it's I think more of an act of spite and diversion than anything. That said, WHO has not performed, I think, optimally. I mean, there was too much deference to China at the beginning. I think that also speaks to the absence of U.S. leadership within the organization. The fact that China has been able to leverage a very modest contribution to the WHO speaks, I think, to the U.S. retreat from organizations like that. But the WHO needs to go back and look when the time is right and when it's not trying now to prevent millions from dying, maybe even the risk of billions being infected. I mean, there's 3 billion people in the world, David, who can't wash their hands at home, who don't have clean running water to do so. And so with all of these people at risk, right now the WHO is working on trying to ensure that governments in the developing world who don't have the kinds of cushions that we have, and we've seen our challenges managing our response, but who don't have stimulus packages or $2 trillion bailouts coming, impoverished communities, vulnerable communities, refugees. The WHO is out there and trying to offer technical advice as to how those communities can withstand what is about to hit them. And this will just mean that the WHO is instead scrambling to figure out how it fills the gap that Trump is leaving, but also how it mobilizes the new funds it needs to really ramp up those efforts.
Ambassador Meyer, you make a very important point. You talked about being able to wash your hands, basic hygiene. You wrote in the New York Times recently about this great disparity, not just in the ratio of doctors to populace, but also, as you say, a lot of people around the world can't even wash their hands. So as much as we struggle with this crisis here in the United States, how much worse is it going to be in a lot of the lower income countries?
It's going to be devastating, I think, on both axes that we're experiencing, right? First, in terms of the lethality and the contagiousness of the epidemic itself. Because of close overcrowding and the close quarters in which people in poor communities often live, the ability to practice the kind of social distancing that we are managing, if we're lucky, in some of our neighborhoods in the United States, I mean, that ability is not there. And so when one individual brings the virus home, it's likely not only to infect whole families, but potentially whole neighborhoods, or at least whole city blocks or slum blocks. So if you think about refugee camps in Idlib or in southern Turkey, for that matter, if you think about the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh, but even if you think of the favelas in Brazil or the slums of informal settlements in South Africa or in India, I mean, it is just going to race through those communities. And then part of that health concern and the sort of ravaging of the virus concern is that the health facilities to manage the spread, to get people in early, to hydrate them, to put them on ventilators. I mean, these communities don't have ventilators. If we had trouble, getting masks and PPE for our health workers, you can imagine what a refugee camp is going to be experiencing. So that's in the health domain, what the virus does and how much more contagious and more deadly it can be because of the absence of proper health care. Then you combine that, David, with the economic toll, and we're experiencing that here. That's why so many Americans need desperately the $1,200 checks because they don't have another source of income, having been laid off. They have their families to feed. They have insulin that they have to buy for their diabetic children. I mean, that's in a developed country like this one, and we have had the stimulus package passed, and maybe there'll be more to follow. When that economic livelihood is taken away for families that are living hand to mouth, in those slums or who are dependent on international aid that has now dried up because it's being diverted to domestic response, you can imagine even the risk not only of malnutrition but of outright starvation. And you saw in Kenya this week riots already erupting because food has become so scarce, just not because yet of the virus wiping people out or the virus wiping out the local economy in Kenya, but because now the markets aren't available for the goods that were being produced in Kenya because the flights have been suspended, so there's no place, even if you grow the products, no way to get them to market. And so already we're seeing that economic toll, and that's before this has really hit in the way that we know it will in the coming days.
Samantha, you make a very powerful point about, given the fact that it's this bad in the United States, how much worse will it be elsewhere. Does it also, though, cut a different way? What is the U.S. capacity to really lead right now? Because unlike Ebola, for example, where we had some cases come back here, but it didn't ravage the country, it didn't ravage the economy, do we have the capacity right now in the United States to really perform a leadership role globally on this pandemic? At the same time, we're trying to protect ourselves back here.
I think that's exactly the right question, and the answer is yes, we do have that capacity, but I think, of course, the perception is that we don't. And so why do we? Well, the kinds of people who would be pooling their expertise, whether scientific or public health or lessons learned in terms of what earlier countries have done. It's the epidemic. The one advantage of the way that it has spread is that it's staggered, and we have the ability to learn so much about what has worked and when is too soon to reopen certain sectors, and what can we learn about antibodies, and whether that allows a greaher preparedness again to begin to flow people back to jobs from that are not existing right now because we're shutting everything down. So we can learn. So there's a pooling function that stems from convening countries and really drilling into the insights that can be gathered. That's already happening, I think, in scientific circles as it relates to the vaccine. It appears to be even without frontal U.S. leadership. Then there's the sort of look ahead in terms of our manufacturing cycles and those of others in developing countries. But it's not only about who's providing the PPE, it's about who's organizing the distribution of the PPE. And we have, David, huge amounts of experience in USAID, our aid agency, in the State Department, our diplomatic corps. And even there are parts of Health and Human Services and, of course, very significant parts of the CDC that are only internationally oriented. I mean, that's where the specialties lie of experts who work within these agencies. So it's not as if they right now, the individuals I'm talking about, again, who are only a small subset of the public servants active in thinking about corona generally, it's not as if they're currently working on trying to get PPE to New York hospitals. They are individuals who could very much be taking a leadership role at the United Nations, pushing a plan, either a U.S.-Chinese plan, which would be probably one that would gather, rally the entire world, or just a U.S. plan, and getting countries to do their share of the task. And there are going to be many tasks ahead. So there are different personnel involved, different resources. The stimulus actually did include $1.3 billion for the international response, but no senior official seems to be taking charge to figure out how it gets allocated.
Okay, very powerful. Thank you so much, Ambassador Power, for being with us. That's Samantha Power, former UN Ambassador to the United Nations, and author of the memoir, The Education of an Idealist. This is Bloomberg.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
G20 finance ministers met earlier today virtually to talk about relief to be given, particularly to less developed countries. We're now joined by one of the people who was on that call. He is the Saudi Arabian finance minister. He is Mohammed Al Jadaan. Thank you so much, Mr. Minister, for joining us. Let me start with, is this or is just this the beginning of a series of actions that G20 is going to have to take to help the world economy?
Thank you very much. I think it is an ongoing, and we are continuing to monitor the COVID-19 as it's unfolding. The speed, the spread, and the severity of the COVID-19 outbreak is unprecedented, and that basically requires strong and swift and significant actions by the G20. As the presidency of the G20, we have put together a very strong strategy with our partners, the G20 members, to ensure that we are ready and we are responsive. The strategy basically assesses the situation constantly, whether it is health and economy, and then ensure that we put together protection for the people, for businesses, and prepare also to rebuild the economies as things unfold. Basically, the containment measures that have been made by the various countries in the world have put the economy almost in hibernation, and we need to make sure that while we are protecting people, their lives, their livelihoods, we also ensure that their income is protected, their businesses are protected, and we prepare the world for a recovery in a very coordinated manner amongst the G20 members.
And Mr. Minister, one step is to say we're going to suspend for the time being, put in suspended animation, payments on sovereign debt. That it allows them not to have to deploy the cash that way. But is there suggestions that we might actually be injecting cash into some of the economies that need it?
Absolutely. I think what we have seen, swift actions by the G20 in coordination with the IMF and the World Bank, is unprecedented. The G20 alone have put together in the global economy north of $7 trillion so far. That obviously means that they are able to import from and move the economy of other countries at the same time. Two is the IMF support package that has been approved today by the ministers and governors of the G20 ensures that sufficient liquidity is available to poor countries, to emerging economies, in addition to obviously the swap lines and the repos that are available through the central banks packages that they have already announced.
And at what point will the G20 finance ministers be getting back together to reconsider this?
I mean, we are in constant, as I said, we are in constant dialogue. We have had only over the last 6 weeks, 4 meetings of the finance ministers and central bank governors. We'll continue monitoring this. We will work with the IMF, and we will meet as needed to ensure that we deliver on the leaders' clear mandate to the finance ministers to ensure that we do everything we can to support the economy, the people, the businesses.
Okay, Mr. Minister, thank you very much. We're going to be back with the Saudi Arabian Finance Minister, Mohammed Al-Jadaan, coming up shortly on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are falling on sour earnings from big banks and weak economic reports, which is adding to concerns over a severe global recession. In earnings, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Citigroup all reported a plunge in quarterly results. And with stores closing and people suddenly losing their paychecks, very few went shopping. March retail sales dropped 8.7%, the most on record. And the Federal Reserve reports U.S. factory production dropped in March by the most since 1946. But U.S. airlines rallied today after reaching preliminary deals to access billions of dollars in federal aid. On Wall Street, the Dow is falling 622 points, S&P dropping 76. The Nasdaq is down 168 points. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.